and get started, and then we'll have our discussion and Q&A in which all of you can participate. So we do encourage you to add questions to the chat at any time, and then we'll go through as many of those as we can. Just a few housekeeping issues as well. We are recording this session, so we'll have the link available afterwards. We do ask that everybody stay muted until you're called upon, and then just be respectful to all of your fellow participants. So just to give a quick background on the Housing Peer Exchange Program, this was started by myself and two of my colleagues, Mitch Hendrick and Robin DeFalco. We're all here in the Department of Local Affairs, Division of Local Government. So Mitch runs the Innovative Housing Planning Grants Program, which was known as IHOP. I run the Strong Communities Planning Grants Program, which has the wonderful term of SCIG. And Robin DeFalco runs the Local Planning Capacity Grant Program. And so what we wanted to do with this program was to create a forum to share the challenges and successes and innovative approaches that all of you are taking to address the housing crisis in Colorado. But what we really wanted was for to create a space where the people who are working on these issues can talk to one another and learn from one another. And so we're just going to be presenting a new topic each month. As you know, from when you registered for the program, we did ask what topics you may be interested in and what topics you might be interested in speaking on. So as we get going, we will be following up with some of you on that. But today, we have Colorado Springs and Longmont here to present on their incentive programs. So we have Holly Robertson from who is a program manager with Colorado Springs, and Katie Sunderland, who is the acting chief housing person. I'm sorry, I'm looking, I have too many windows open and I'm looking for the right one. So I don't have the bios up, unfortunately. So I'm going to let you all do your own introductions. So from Longmont, we have Kayleen Whaley, who is the Affordable Housing Program Specialist, and Christy Wiseman, who is the Housing Investment Manager. So we're going to start with Colorado Springs. So Holly and Katie, I will turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Lisa. Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Sunderland. I'm the Acting Chief Housing Officer for the City of Colorado Springs. So I oversee our Housing and Community Vitality Department. And so we administer HUD grants, as well as oversee housing, affordable and attainable housing policy and homelessness policy and response for the city.
And on the project management side, I work on actually implementing our home and CDBG funds for new development and minor rehab, and administering the fee rebate incentives program, which we're going to share with you.
Okay. So about 3 years ago, our community started working on a fee rebate program to rebate applicable charges that were accrued during the development review process. And so in our community, these are the review fees that are encompassed within a project. And so it's typical to most communities, we're seeing building department review fees, impact fees, either for parks and schools, utilities, et cetera. So we were working on how can we rebate some of these fees to incentivize development of affordable housing within our community. The way that we are funding this program is through our private activity bond issuer fees. So our city receives about $30 million in private activity bonds. So the fee that we charge to issue those bonds fills the bucket so that we can rebate these development review charges. In addition to that, we have philanthropic donations to our rebate funds, as well as grants, one being from the state. And then Colorado Springs Utilities, which is the utility company that serves the city of Colorado Springs, also is a partner in this program and provides funding to rebate the portion of utility and infrastructure fees.
So the program works as a rebate, not a reduction or a waiver. So projects pay their full fees upfront and they're rebated after payment in full. The fees that are eligible for rebate include development charges from Land Use Review, PLBO, Public Works, and Colorado Springs Utilities. And the percentage rebate that they receive is based on how well they score in our program. So we'll run through the actual categories in a moment. Applications that are considered are multifamily rental projects, both affordable and attainable within the city of Colorado Springs and Colorado Springs Utilities service area. And it's capped at 120% AMI.
So the way that we are scoring these projects to determine what their rebate is through what we consider a community underwriting process. So it's a scorecard of 50 points. The ones that are highlighted in yellow are what we kind of call the points that you can buy. And so what we try to do is get these developers early on in their development phase. So we're talking to their architects and their design team before any of this is going to bid through their general contractor. Sorry, I was reading the comments. And their score that they're receiving on the left is tied to a rebate that you can see on the right of these charts. So the yellow, that I'll just run through the scores. So we're looking at what is your affordability level, what AMIs are you serving in this development, and are you doing this for a long period of time. So this is for affordable and attainable. We've seen a couple of attainable projects run through this program, and where our attainable projects are scoring is about a 20% rebate, and it's mostly because of those affordability levels, as well as what their LURAs are restricting those rents to. The next couple section is we are scoring additional points for units that are fully accessible beyond what code requires. So there's a 5% requirement for fully accessible, like physically accessible. So having your turning radiuses for your wheelchairs, as well as units that are adaptable for those with visual and hearing impairments. So for every unit above what code requires, we are giving the developments a point. And this is why it's important to get these developers early when they're still within their construction, like design development phases, because these units take more space than a typical unit. And so when we can get them early, we've seen that they're able to add these units. The next category is setting aside units for special needs populations. So this is what HUD defines as special needs populations, is because our department, the majority of our funding is HUD funding. So this is those who are experiencing homelessness, domestic violence. There's a list of 7 of them that we work with. Typically, though, what we're seeing in our projects is that if developers are willing to set aside units for people who are on our coordinated entry system, what we're doing is entering into an MOU with our local COC who runs our coordinated entry. And they are working with organizations to say, okay, you will the COC from coordinated entry will provide referrals for these 30% AMI units for those who are experiencing homelessness. And then we see a partner MOU for kind of light touch services. So the coordinated entry folks that we're pulling into some of these units, because it's not a permanent supportive housing development, it's typically like our 4% LIHTC or a 4% competitive. The folks who are on coordinated entry are honestly homeless because of an economic situation, and so don't necessarily need these wraparound services. And so the peer agencies that are coming in to provide services are doing more of light touch, like financial management, general check-ins, et cetera. But if the developers are willing to pull people off this list, we will incentivize them with this program with funding attached to it. The next area is universal design. So what we've done is required our developers to both do interview processes with potential and potential staff and potential residents to make sure that the building is responding to the needs of the future residents. And then taking that feedback and incorporating and meshing in the 7 principles of universal design. So universal design is not a codified type of design. It is really, it's exactly what it is. It's a principle. It goes both for building design and for product design. So it's pretty interchangeable in how it works. And so the feedback that the architects are receiving, we want to see how they are incorporating that into the design and then melding universal into that too. Sorry, that kind of botched those words there. The second is, how are these developments aligning with our planning documents? We have many comprehensive plans, I'm sure just as many of the other cities do. Comprehensive planning documents, transportation planning documents, et cetera, that are coming out of our departments. And so how is this furthering those areas? And a lot of it has to do with your proximity to trails and open space, our bus stops, et cetera. We also use a third-party index called the High Opportunity. It's called the Childhood Opportunity Index. If you were familiar with Opportunity 360, that platform sunset about 3 years ago, and we did some research, and this one is very comparable. So taking into account really like holistic health factors. So how long is it taking most people to get to work? Are there high levels of graduation rates? How many people in this area are insured? There's many different categories that this index rates different parts of our city, and based off of the score that comes out of this index, we apply a point level. And then the final category is incorporation of conservation programs from our utility department. So this is how and why our utility department is involved in this program, is because we are seeing every single one of our developers incorporate these additional conservation features above and beyond what code requires and what LEED requires and what like green building standards that LIHTC is using require. So we are seeing great success in these highlighted areas of these developments are being tailored to what our community needs and not necessarily just what LIHTC and CHAFA and even the state are asking for.
Katie, do you want to skip through a couple? You could even go to slide 17, I think.
Sorry about that.
No, you're all good. You summarized all these, which is great. So this, like Katie was talking about, we're seeing developers tailor projects to these criteria now. On the left, you can see projects that were we caught them at the very tail end of their design. They were eligible for the program. They did score enough points to receive a rebate, but they weren't doing things like adding accessible units or including those sustainability features. If we can work with their team early in the design, we see projects score really well. We've had several 80% projects come through lately.
So how we're trying to keep compliance with this and make sure that developers are actually following through is that we have them sign a LURA, which we end up subordinating to all the other LURAs within the especially in LIHTC projects. This hasn't been an issue since most of these projects do already have this 30-year land use restriction. And then projects found to be in non-compliance will have to repay the funds. So because we started this about 3 years ago, we're seeing our first rebated projects come to completion. So what we'll end up doing is just asking for letters from their architect or from their contractor confirming that, yes, these extra units were included, these sustainability features are included in the design, and then move forward from there.
So big picture takeaways, what we found is that if we interact with these developers earlier, they're more successful in the program. You don't have to design your program the way we did. Ours was very tailored around what we wanted to see, what the community need was. So I think probably a lot of those features are universal across Colorado. Probably most communities need more accessible units, but you could incentivize something else if you wanted. We've seen rebates be gap financing tool. So we've had projects come to us with a gap on top of what they've shown us initially, and we've worked with them to increase what features they're including to meet that gap to be able to provide a bigger rebate. And we've also seen projects use this as a local contribution, as evidence when they apply for other grants, that there is a local contribution in the project through the rebate. And it also can just be a great collaboration tool. Working with CSU, we've met their objectives by increasing conservation and sustainability, which is really important for them, and they've helped us meet our goals as well.
And some of the other jurisdictions that potentially don't have additional funding revenue for affordable housing programs, what we've seen is that this is really has, and Holly did touch on this, but is one of the bigger things that I'm seeing recently is that the state has quite a bit of funding that we're seeing in our capital stacks. Our HUD funding runs out much quicker than the state's funding does, and the availability to apply that to our local projects. And so what we're seeing is that our local match is becoming more and more this rebate program in some of our developments. And so we're really thankful to have this additional tool to be able to show that, yes, our local jurisdiction is behind these developments. So that we can participate financially in them. Okay.
Great, thank you so much. Can we move over then to Christy and Kayleen from Longmont?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I'll do a quick intro while Kayleen pulls up our slides. So I'm Christy Wiseman. I'm the Housing Investment Manager for the City of Longmont. I came to this role in March of this year, so still learning the breadth of incentives that we have here in the city, but Longmont is really progressive in our affordable housing work, and we're always looking to tweak and improve both the carrots and the sticks that we have as part of our incentive program, as well as our strong inclusionary housing ordinance. So I'm going to turn it over to the real expert, which is Kayleen, who is the IH and incentives guru on our team and our affordable housing specialist, and she will take it away.
Thank you so much, Christy. All right, so I think the roadmap for this conversation is we'll talk about the incentives that the City of Longmont is currently offering. I'll then show how all of these incentives when working together are really making an impact here in Longmont. We'll talk about some wonderful projects that we've completed in the last few years as a result of all of these incentives working together. And then we'll share a little bit more about some upcoming changes that we're going through, and then absolutely take time for question and answers. I'm gonna move this morning. There we go. All right. So in Longmont, we actually, I feel like, have a pretty robust incentive package that we offer developers when they're interested in doing affordable housing. We do also, like Colorado Springs is talking about, we try to get with the developers very early on in their projects, even before they show up with ready to submit for any kind of entitlement work. But the main 4 categories that we're really trying to make an impact in is we want to provide assistance in fees, land use incentives, gap financing, and we have an entitlement liaison really to help developers get through our entitlement process as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So under the fee category, we're making impacts in fee deferrals. So we have a fee deferral program, a fee waiver program, and an offset program. So in fee deferrals, really it is exactly what it sounds like. We are holding off on affordable housing developers having to pay a number of city fees until right before they come in for CO. This has been great. This allows a lot of developers have adjustments in their cash flow issues, and just lets them wait until the very last minute to pay us for services rendered. Then we have a fee waiver program, also like Colorado Springs. We have a scorecard criteria, really how you score on that scorecard translates into a percentage in fee waivers from our office. Our scorecard, like Colorado Springs, it's nice to see. Normally we're looking at depth of affordability, but we also have a couple items that are very tailored to meet the specific needs and desires within Longmont. And that's been wonderful. So I think that's very nice that across the state we are mirroring each other in that regard. So we can give up administratively, we can give up to a 50% fee waiver for rental projects, 100% fee waivers on for sale projects, 75% on for sale attainable projects. That's a very new program that we just adopted last year. And then we have codified that any affordable or attainable projects can go to city council to request 100% fee waiver. There is actual requirements that they need to show that there's a need for 100% of the fees waived, and then ultimately then the city is up to city council. Our offset program is also very popular. It's available for water sewer system development fees specifically. And the way that also works is project has to provide more than the minimum affordable housing in Longmont in order to qualify to be considered for offsets. What then happens, they get a score through that scorecard, and it correlates to a percentage in reduction on offset. And then we have a local affordable housing fund that then repays for offsets the reduction that the developer gave to the enterprise funds. So those enterprise funds are still always remain whole, and that makes working with our public works department and our electrical company very happy. The next categories, we have land use incentives. They're pretty standard what we see across the region. You know, we're encouraging density, we're encouraging ADUs. We give a little bit extra if you're doing affordable housing, you know, an extra story, an increase in density bonus by 20%, adjustments in design standards, particular lot size, width. And then we have gap financing. So our office does an annual competitive funding cycle. So if you are a developer doing an affordable housing project in Longmont and you have a gap, you are welcome to apply for these funds. We have three major pots of money. The first is our local affordable housing fund, which I touched base on. That is a revolving loan fund that is being fed through an annual general fund transfer from the city, marijuana sales tax revenue, and then our inclusionary housing fee. If you pay the fee instead of building new units, it gets put into that bucket as well. This year, we were able to give $3 million away in grant funding, which was very exciting. And then Longmont is also an entitlement company, or entitlement city, excuse me. So we do get CDBG funds annually that can help with certain projects, and then home allocation when it's our year. So we are in a consortium that rotates and share those funds with the city of Boulder and Brookfield. And then lastly, we have an entitlement liaison. We have a planning contract, planning contract with a consultant, Tetra Tech. They're a local group and they're fantastic. If you are a nonprofit or a first-time developer, you are eligible to use their services. This is paid for through the local affordable housing fund. And that's been incredibly successful. The last several projects that the company has worked with has gotten the projects through DRC, our development review process, through reviews, which is incredibly fast for here in Longmont. And then lastly, my position itself has kind of morphed into being a liaison of sorts, helping developers understand our inclusionary housing program, the various, helping them get through entitlements and learn about incentives as well. All right, so how this has all kind of played out and impacted Longmont is, so Longmont's been doing affordable housing incentives since 2003. And we've been fortunate enough that they've been tracking the progression of number of units that we add on each year. And you can see through all of that data that 2018 was a major change in our office and our ability to generate units. In 2018, we adopted an inclusionary housing ordinance, and that kind of acts as the stick that requires a developer to provide some level of affordability in their projects. And with that, the developers really have two primary choices. They can either provide the units on site, and when they've decided to do that, all of a sudden they're using our incentives. So all of a sudden there's tons of fee waivers going on. Land use code options that have been around for years are being used, and the liaisons have been busy. If they didn't choose to do affordable housing for a variety of reasons, they pay that fee in lieu. That fee in lieu then ends up in our affordable housing bucket. And then we've been able to leverage it to get external funding sources, enter public-private partnerships, And as a result, in 2022, we generated 244 units, which was our largest annual unit generation to date. So that was when you have all of these incentives working together, it really does make an impact. No one incentive is going to, I think, be so definitely look for lots of incentives that you're seeing. So then just kind of an idea of, give an idea of some of the projects that we've completed in the last few years. All of these have been completed anytime between this year and 2018. And they all used a variety of different incentives or a combination of them to get them through. Chrisman 2 is 83 units apartment complex that used fee waivers and offsets. Cinnamon Park senior housing used land use incentives. 15 on field and Habitat for Humanity both used gap financing, and then Greenspire, which is 10 units, used our entitlement liaison. They were a first-time mom and pop developer, and it went so well that we're actually meeting with them this week, and they're ready to try their hands again at being developers and work on our next project. So yeah, just kind of give an idea of what one wants to look to. All right, so Lisa sent over some guided questions, so we'll kind of quickly walk through these. I was asked what our most impactful incentive, and it's definitely fee waivers and offsets. That's something that the developers very much like. The least impactful incentive is going to be height bonuses and parking. These may be pretty Longmont specific reasons why they're not super successful incentives. Most of the developers that come to the table, they're already building to the highest amount of stories in the apartment complex that they're comfortable with. And usually when I offer them one more extra story, they're moving out of wood frame construction into steel. And that's just not their bread and butter or something that they're interested in. So it's not used, but it may in a much more urban city be an excellent incentive. Parking is a great incentive. It doesn't work so much here in Longmont because our planning department, what they were offering in parking incentives, and just was way nicer than what I was able to offer. And so they canceled each other out. So I think that's another piece of advice. Anytime your city's bringing in a new incentive, just triple check that your land use code is not undoing the incentive. So we have conflicting things. So it's not working that well. Did the city of Longmont have to overcome any opposition? Of course. Change is hard. Affordable housing is a very complex, confusing world, and it's hard to understand. And so the way that we handle this in Longmont is we're really deliberate with our approaches, and we don't rush to get approval. We will go to council as many times and have as many conversations and answer as many questions until council feels confident in the decision and they have a real understanding. The incentives that we're working on right now to update, we've gone to council already 3 times. And we're probably going to go maybe 2 to 4 more times, or even have to pull back and take it even in smaller chunks. So we're very deliberate. Is there anything you'd like to change about our incentive program? Yes. If any other jurisdiction has a database software that lets you guys track incentives and housing that's coming online, please share. Our contact information is after this. We're still using old school Excel spreadsheets. So we're definitely in the market for a better database and tracking system. And then we'd love to see our liaison program expanded. Even when we have a number of market rate developers that are coming into the affordable housing space, and they could benefit from a liaison that understands the affordable housing side, understands city entitlement. But unfortunately, we just haven't had the funds in years past to expand that program to really let for-profit developers benefit from it. So one day when we have all of them, we'll expand and help everyone build affordable housing. All right, so we are working on some code updates. Some fall into administrative and some are more on the regulatory side. We had the pleasure in 2022 and 2023 to work on a housing needs assessment. And with that, we threw in there a review of our inclusionary housing program and a review on our incentives. And the incentive analysis they did recommended a few changes to kind of improve, kind of improve or grow or strengthen our existing incentives program. So many of these we thought were low hanging fruit and we're going to be quick to approve, and they have not turned into that. So we are just slowly working to remove, knock some of these out. And we'll see if any of them pass or what happens from there. So. Right, so here is Christy and my contact information if you guys have any additional questions that we're not able to answer this time. Lisa, I will hand over control to you.
All right, thank you all so much. Those were both really great presentations with a lot of information to digest. And we have been getting quite a few questions in the chat, which is fantastic. And I see that Holly has been going in and doing some, adding some answers in there. So thank you for that. So we did have one come through the Q&A that I don't think people were able to see, and that was, are TAP fees eligible for rebates?
Yes, they are.
Is that for both cities?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I'm just going to run through these. I know Katie and Holly have been answering some of them, but just so that everybody can see, let's see, are you issuing the financial rebate prior to project completion, and if so, why?
We're
Go ahead.
on our end, we're not issuing it prior to well, I guess we're issuing it after financial closing. So yes, it is prior to project completion. What we're seeing is that our fee rebate is being used as a source within Performas. And so all of the fees that we're rebating are paid at financial closing. So we're able to rebate those 6 weeks after we receive all the receipts from our review agencies. And so we're able to put that money right into the project initially.
Great. All right. And next is, how many development projects have utilized this program since it was implemented? And I believe this was directed more at Colorado Springs, but we'll give both sides a chance to answer. Has it met or exceeded expectations?
So on our side, we've had 11 projects rebated, 7 in the pipeline, and I think we definitely have, on our side, have felt that it exceeded expectations. It's been very successful, like Katie talked about. I don't think we initially anticipated it to be used as a source on Proformas, so to be able to see it make that difference as a gap filler has been huge.
We've also seen, and if there's any other jurisdictions that are typically HUD funded, we've also seen that, projects will come back and say, hey, can we have an additional $150,000 in home funds? And honestly, our pipeline is tapped, and so we don't have those resources. But what we say is you can review your rebate score. And so what we've seen is developments tweak what they're doing within their development to gain that additional funding through our rebate program as opposed to our HUD pipeline.
All right, and then there was a question from Lisa Ritchie about ability to share the agreement. And so that was and Holly responded with her email address. And we'll share, with their permission, all of the speakers' email addresses if you'd like to follow up later on. At what point in the project is the rebate amount determined? Like, is it prior to construction, building permit issuance, etc.?
So we do a run through of a project score pretty much as soon as a developer comes to us with a proposal. And then we try to keep in pretty close touch with them throughout the process, especially since most of these projects also receive home funds. So we're talking with them anyway. And then immediately before we actually issue the rebate, we go through and re-verify everything a lot more formally, request letters from their architect, things like that. So right before we issue it, we double check it again. And sometimes it's gone up, it doesn't go down.
Does someone from Longmont want to answer that question as well?
I'm sorry, would you repeat it? I was counting
Yeah, sure.
projects.
The question was, at what point in the project do you determine the amount of the rebate?
Yeah, so we actually do that during the first submittal of the plat. So as soon as they have kind of a project scope, they fill out an application.
And our fee, do you want to explain what the fee amount is based on?
Yeah, so the fee amounts are going to be based on depth of affordability and a couple other different criteria as far as, you know, are you have ADA compliance? Are you housing seniors or people coming in and out of homelessness? Are you providing a community benefit? And we have a plethora of options that might be deemed as a community benefit. So those are the main things that we're looking for.
Great. There's also a question about the presentation being available after the meeting, and yes, we will make the recording available and slides with the speaker's permissions. Next question is, what definition are you using for affordable versus attainable? And maybe you could also give a definition of how those two terms, what those two terms really mean. Katie, you provided an answer for this, so I'll let you start.
Yeah, so for this program, we're defining attainable as up to 120% AMI for our rentals, and then affordable is typically up to 70, but honestly, that's just because Chaffa is going up to 70. We don't really see a ton of projects outside of our Chaffa pipeline that are utilizing this. Well, I say that, but we have quite a few actually, like 3 or 4 that are using it, but the affordability levels in those developments are incredibly low, like 30 to 40%.
And what is?
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Kayleen.
So in Longmont, rentals need to be deed restricted at 50% AMI or below. For sale is up to 80% AMI, and so those are in your affordable buckets. And then for attainable, that is between 100% and 120% AMI, but we only acknowledge a for sale product in our attainable space right now. Because the rent limits at 100% AMI are still relatively high.
And so I'd like to follow up with both of you on, for people who may not be clear on what the difference between affordable housing is and what attainable housing is, could you maybe provide a little bit more information on maybe what types of populations fall into those two categories?
So
Yeah.
in our oh, go ahead, Christy.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it really depends on the community. Different local governments will have different codified AMI levels for what they feel those terms apply to definition wise. So if you're working in a variety of communities, it's always really important to check with the local government and what their local definitions are, if they have them, because it does tend to vary. So I just wanted to put that out there. Like, everyone's numbers aren't always the same, but go ahead, Katie.
No, I think that's great.
I will say too, there's been a trend. Another way to tell the difference between affordable and attainable is going to be related to the length of affordability that's being required. Each jurisdiction is going to be a little bit different, but generally you see the affordable space having a deed restriction that's in place relatively about 30 years, or you hear in perpetuity is a common one you see across the state. And then the attainable space, usually that deed restriction is for a shorter time frame. I know in Longmont, we're keeping the deed restriction on for 7 years. But other jurisdictions are trying to figure out what that number is of how long you're going to keep your attainable deed restriction in place.
Okay. All right. Next question up. Christy and Kayleen, what is the source of your affordable housing fund? They missed that.
Yeah, so
go ahead.
I'm like, the money, that's my favorite part, is the funding we get to do is a big part of my job. So I entered it in the chat, but just verbally. So our local affordable housing fund, which is, let me just say, can't emphasize enough how important it is to have a local source of funding to leverage state and federal funding and not have all of those lovely HUD strings attached that we're all familiar with. So our local affordable housing fund has a few different revenue sources. We do get a general fund transfer from City Council that has been happening every year, and that is about $1 million plus a little bit of admin. We also get a portion of our city's marijuana sales tax revenue. And then we also, the big contributor is fee in lieu revenue from developers that are choosing to pay fee in lieu rather than building units on site if they are required to do an inclusionary housing option. And then it's also technically a revolving loan fund. We do some grants out of it, but most of our development project awards are low interest loans. So like 1% interest rate for 20, 30, 40-year term, depending on what works for the project. So we do occasionally get repayments back from previous loans. And then local consideration is that we're also collaborating with all the Boulder County jurisdictions in Boulder County right now to figure out how our county's 1B funds are going to be allocated. So that was a countywide sales tax source that was passed last year, and funds will become available in 2025. And depending on the decision of that allocation, potentially that could be another source into our local affordable housing fund. Did I miss anything, Caitlin?
No, that was great.
And our folks from Colorado Springs, where does your revenue source for your programs come from?
Right now it's just our private activity bond issuance fee and a line item from Colorado Springs Utilities, cash on hand, like their general fund.
And we have a grant from DOLA
Yes.
that we're about to use up.
And our hospital contributed money. So we, unlike a lot of our jurisdictions, we don't have a set like inclusionary housing ordinance or fee in lieu of. So the funding sources that we're utilizing for these programs are quite creative.
Great. All right. The next question is about housing authorities and how your departments interact with those, or maybe you are the housing authority, which is a great tie into our last month's topic, which is all about housing authorities. So how do you both, how do housing authorities work in your communities?
So in Longmont, the Longmont Housing Authority literally sits next door to us on the other side of this wall you guys see here. So we are able to work with them. While they are a separate agency, we work very closely with them in collaborating on different types of projects and things that are going on. So that's been a very nice help for our department.
Yeah, and I would just add for LHA, they're kind of unique in that they generally do a co-GP or SLP or just like managing partner type deal structure in their projects. And so they don't fully self-develop unless it's like a rehabilitation of a project they already own. When they're doing new projects, they generally partner with a private development company and do one of those structure models. And so they will apply to us often for gap funding for their projects. And it's then technically, like if they were to come to our affordable housing fund and get a low interest loan, the loan is then loaned into the triple LP tax credit partnership. So that's where the attorneys get their good fees, is figuring out all of the fund structures on those. But yes, they are able to take advantage of our resources, which is really nice for them because they don't have a lot of their own revenues.
And Colorado Springs?
So our housing authority is separate from our city, and so we interact with them as we do other developers in our community. Our mayor appoints their board, but they are really kind of their own organization.
Okay. We have about 10 minutes left, so we're going to try and get through the rest of these questions. So when you were developing your programs, who did you reach out to get feedback and review the effectiveness of the incentives that you were looking at? Did you have Chrissy mentioned in her response that they reached out to Root Policy. So did you have a consultant? Did you reach out and have like an advisory group? How did you work that out?
So Root Policy was definitely our consultant lead on this. And then in collaboration with them, I provided a list of developers that we work with in the city to give input. And so they were more than willing to share their thoughts and concerns. We also do have a Housing and Human Advisory Board. And so we shared that with them, hearing their concerns as well. So it was a combination of items.
And so for our fee rebate program, we developed it internally initially, and each of the departments that kind of oversees some of these areas had suggestions on the review criteria. And then annually, Holly and I do an audit of how the program is working. Is it actually delivering the needs that we're looking for in our community? So we go back to CSU and ask them to take a look at the standards and see if they need to update that. One of the bigger changes that we made recently was initially for universal design, we were just asking for a letter from architects to say, how are you incorporating these elements of universal design? And at my previous occupation, I was an architect, and so I could tell that there was a lot of fudging of what they were actually doing. It wasn't thoughtful incorporation of universal design based on the responses that we were getting. And so we worked with Laura Rosbert at Shopworks Architecture and incorporated a lot of their trauma-informed questioning into the required questionnaire for either the future residents or future staff. And so that questionnaire is utilized, and we review those answers and then review the letters that are coming in to make sure that that feedback was actually incorporated.
Great. And this is a great question with maybe Robin on the line as well. What is the staff capacity needed to administer the incentives? And I know you both answered this, but just so we can have it for everybody who's not reading the questions.
Kayleen, do you want to?
Definitely one full-time person, but secretly, Christy, I would love a second if we get to do a shamelessly plug. Yeah, but at the minimum, I think one full-time staffer is probably necessary, especially if you have a ton of incentives to walk a developer through.
Yeah, and I will also say that we have a good working relationship with our planning department. Kayleen has really put a lot of effort into fostering that relationship, and we co-lead a lot of code updates, like the incentives updates we're working on right now that she mentioned. But it still takes a lot of coordination, even if you are the subject matter expert and you're working with a, willing other department and they're wanting to collaborate. It just takes a lot of time, and especially working with other utilities and other departments that maybe have their own fees that are like if you're proposing a fee waiver or offset program and they're concerned about being made whole, even if you have a backup source in mind, there's a lot of education that needs to happen, because even within the city organization, most folks don't have all the technical knowledge about affordable housing that some of us take for granted. So really putting in the time to develop that professional working relationship with other departments is a big component of success of this work too.
I would echo that. I would say that it's definitely one full-time person to be able to do the incentives. And similar to what Longmont was talking about, Holly and I split these duties now as I'm working in the acting position, but we also foster our affordable and attainable housing developers through our planning and entitlement review process. We're working on code scrubs. We're working on parking reduction waivers and letters from us for that. that the suite of services that is offered to developers through our planning process does take 2 of us in administration of our home funds. And then we have another full-time staff member that is just doing monitoring on our multifamily portfolio.
Well, I think that for communities that are small, like Wheat Ridge, I was just having this discussion with my supervisor. We're looking at an IHO program and a NOAA program, and just the issues about, doing loan or grant underwriting, monitoring, compliance, particularly over a period of time, is beyond the resources of this community. And I think about Edgewater and other small communities. It's a difficult burden into what you were just also talking about. There are 7 different water districts or 7 different special districts in Wheat Ridge, which are third party, which we have no control over. And so trying to coordinate with them, Denver Water, Wheat Ridge Water, et cetera, is also difficult because their goals and objectives aren't necessarily aligned with the idea about creating affordable housing.
That's a great point, Terrence. Thank you for bringing that up. And I think Robin can help maybe provide some help with that.
Yes, thanks for teeing that up, Lisa. I am with the Local Planning Capacity Grant Program, which is funded out of Prop 123. Many of you on this call are recipients of that grant program. And one of the nice things is that it's one of the few programs that can fund staff capacity. So especially for those, we're hearing about Longmont and Colorado Springs, very large jurisdictions. Smaller communities are finding that it is very challenging to tackle this without adequate staffing. And we have, for example, funded positions that are either part-time or full-time, or some smaller jurisdictions coming together in partnership to hire one person that could meet both communities' needs, for example. I will drop the details in the chat, but our next funding cycle opens September 1st through September 30th. We have an upcoming informational webinar on July 31st. So again, all that info in the chat, and I'm happy to meet with anyone who would like to explore a potential proposal that might help you do this type of incentive program or other things. I'll hand it back to you, Lisa.
All right, thank you, Robin. And I did have one comment that you were a little bit hard to hear, so we'll make sure that we share that information in a follow-up email to everybody. But basically, Robin is saying that there is support through the Prop 123 Local Capacity Planning Grant Program for those who do have some staffing issues. That does take us, we have about 4 minutes left, so I do want to close there and share some our upcoming dates. So our next meeting will be on Thursday, August 15th, and then September 19th and October 17th. We are still working on the topics, but what we're looking at right now is a session on ADUs, one on water, and then we are looking through all of the topics that were suggested by all of you when you registered. And I see that Robin is adding some additional information here in the chat with links and notices of upcoming funding rounds. So please take a look at that, but we will also include that in our follow-up email. And then the other piece that I wanted to share with everybody is that there is another opportunity for those, and this is particularly for smaller communities here in Colorado. The Sustainable Development Code has opened up the Sustainable Development Code Challenge, and I'm putting the link in here for that. And this is an opportunity to have the folks from the Sustainable Development Code come in and look at your land use code and identify some things that you can do to work towards sustainability and sustainable land use. So 2 communities will be selected. The application is currently open, and will close at the end of next month on August 30th. So I do encourage you to take a look at that. Are there any other announcements that anybody would like to share? I see Mitch has his hand raised.
Yeah, real quick before you all jump off. Finally, at long last, the Model Land Use Code, now known as the Template Land Development Code, should be available in August. Now that it's incorporating some of the new legislative changes, and it will be available to all of you free of charge. So please reach out if you're interested. There's a version for very small counties, municipalities, and then kind of small to medium size. So if you're interested in updating your land use code, reach out and let me know. Otherwise, it'll be on our website, hopefully by mid-August. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Mitch. That is exciting. I know that's been a long time in the works. All right. Well, I think that does it. So thank you all for coming. Thank you very much to our speakers, Christy and Katie and Kayleen and Holly, for joining us today and sharing your experiences. We will get an email follow-up out to everybody. And if anybody has other questions, please reach out to Mitch and Robin and I. We will and we'll do what we can. All right. Thank you all so much, and we will end there. We'll see you next month, August 15th.